The LA Kings lose their chance at a division title and likely home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs after an ugly loss in Las Vegas. So, where does the team go from here? And the Kings' goaltending situation not any clearer after the loss to the Golden Knights. We'll discuss that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. If you could leave a positive comment, for example, on Apple Podcasts, that would be much appreciated. And we are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. My name is Eddie Garcia. I'm your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for the past 30 years. So what is the saying? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Well, I hope so, because the LA Kings need to leave their performance last night in Vegas. The biggest game of the season, with hopes of a division title and home ice advantage in the playoffs potentially at stake. The Kings crapped out in Vegas. I mentioned on Wednesday's show, after the Kings lost to the Oilers in a tough game, that sometimes after a tough loss, I will go back and rewatch the game the next day, try and evaluate things, see things with my emotions taken out of it. I did not go back and watch the game against Vegas again. One time was plenty. We're going to very briefly recap the game and get into some of the details of it and some things that were concerning, which were numerous. But things actually started well for LA, at least we thought. Anze Kopitar would score on a wrist shot with Quinton Byfield providing a screen. And early on, LA took a 1-0 lead, and the top line got a goal. But as it turned out, Anze Kopitar was actually offsides on the play. The Golden Knights challenged, and the goal was correctly taken off the board. One of the few calls I thought the refs actually did get right, in my opinion. Careless play by the captain. He was staring right at the puck as it was being taken across the blue line. Didn't, I guess, know where he was on the ice. Really no excuse for it. And that was pretty much how the game would go for the LA Kings. Phil Kessel would give Vegas a 1-0 lead on a wraparound goal. Golden Knights would extend their lead to 2-0 on a tap-in goal on the back door. Golden Knights made it 3-0 on controversial call number 1, even though the net was clearly off its post. And even though Vegas forward Phil Kessel was at least partially responsible for knocking the net off, the officials called it a good goal on the ice. And then after video review, upheld the call. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Then LA's Zach McEwen was called for a major boarding penalty, controversial call number 2. And the Golden Knights eventually scored on the ensuing power play to make it 4-0. That was pretty much the game. In the second period, Vegas scored again to make it 5-0. And that was it for goaltender Jonas Korpisalo, who got pulled in favor of Phoenix Copley, who played the rest of the game. LA finally did get on the board twice in the second period. Anze Kopitar with a power play goal, and then Vladislav Gavrikov with a gorgeous shorthanded goal, one of the few highlights of the night for the Kings. And then in the third period, both teams frankly acted like they just wanted to get it over with, and the Kings would lose 5-2 in a game that didn't even feel that close, at least to me anyway. Now, on our March 27th episode, as the Kings were riding a franchise record 12-game point streak, I asked if the Kings were elite. My answer at the time was no, because of the quality of opponents that they had played. They played good teams that really hadn't played any great teams or elite teams at that point. And so I said I wanted to see how the Kings were going to do in their upcoming games against the Oilers and Golden Knights. Well, they went 0-3. The Kings are definitely at this point not elite. Now, there's no question the 4 injuries, Kevin Fiala, Gabe Vilardi at forward, defenseman Mikey Anderson and Alex Edler, have played a factor in those 3 losses. If the Kings can get all those guys back for the playoffs, I would feel certainly better about our chances to advance. As it stands right now, I don't feel very good after the way we've played against Vegas and the 2 games against Edmonton. Now, I've watched sports since I was about 10 years old, played sports since I was about 10 years old, and I get it. Sometimes things don't go your way in a game. Maybe a few bad calls and things can suddenly snowball. And we've seen a few games like this for the Kings this year. And you look, with every team, there are some stinkers. But the thing that I cannot wrap my head around, and by the way, Vegas is a very good team, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but I can't understand how the Kings didn't show up in what was basically the biggest game of the year. Todd McClellan said so much afterwards. Said we didn't show up. And I know that there was, I saw a comment on our Twitter account. Someone said that Todd McClellan didn't have the guys ready to play. If you have to motivate players to play in a game like that, there's something wrong. I mean, again, this was the biggest game of the year to this point. There were a lot of things at stake in this game. And it's one thing for the Kings to go out and lose to a good team on the road. It's another thing to poop the bed. I mean, how do you not show up in that game? It's very concerning. It's very troubling. Like I said, look, I've watched sports a long time, played sports a long time, and sometimes games just get away from you. But it's hard not to be disappointed, upset, frustrated, concerned about how the Kings came out and played in that game. Now, I'm an optimistic person by nature, and my hope is that, the Kings will obviously maybe get an injured player or two back, and that this game will serve as a wake-up call to kick them in the pants, to have them say that was embarrassing, and get them properly motivated and set for the upcoming playoffs, which, of course, is the most important time of the year. That is my hope. But my confidence right now is shaken in this team, and I can't deny that. The games against Edmonton, hard fought. They showed up, but that game against Vegas, I don't want to overreact to one game, but as we said, such an important game and such a poor performance. Very concerning. We'll see how they respond, but I also said in a previous show, and I'm standing by this, that if the Kings were to lose to Vegas, the final 3 games of the season are no longer the focus. I don't believe the Kings have a shot at the division title anymore. It would take an out-and-out miracle, frankly. The Kings would have to win out, and Vegas and Edmonton would have to lose out, and that's not going to happen. And I don't think that home ice advantage really is realistically, because Edmonton is in front of us now, and they've got a much easier schedule than we do down the stretch. So to me, it's now time to start focusing on whatever we need to do to get ready for the playoffs. And if that means a couple guys take a game off or whatever, if there's some injury issues that they're playing through and you think that maybe it'll be helped out by giving them a game or two off, do it. These final, look, you want to play good hockey going into the playoffs, of course, but the most important thing right now is to get this team reset and refocused for the postseason. I'm not saying you throw in the towel in the final 3 games. I'm just saying it's time to refocus, and the focus now needs to shift on not these final 3 games, but on getting ready for the playoffs. We are unfortunately going to talk about some details from this game, but I did want to say I know somebody who was at the game on Thursday, and he's someone I've known before this show, and I know he watches this show, and we appreciate it. His name's Martin Devon, and he was at the game. And for him and any Kings fans who made the trip to Vegas to watch that game and cheer on the Kings, I feel so bad for you. That is the worst. My wife and I are both huge sports fans. We love to go to a few road games of our favorite teams every year. And when they went on the road, it's awesome. But when you spend money and you travel and you go to a game and your team absolutely doesn't show up, man, that is the worst. So any Kings fans that are watching or listening to this that went to that game, good on you for making the effort to try and support the Kings. I feel bad for you guys because that sucks. That sucks. I hope you had some fun in Vegas after the game, winning some money or going to a show or maybe drowning your sorrows in some beverages. But that was tough. I've been there. That is not fun. We're going to talk about some of the officiating in the game, and we're also going to talk about the Kings goaltending situation. But first, I want to let you know that today's episode of Locked on LA Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. We are now past the midway point of the NBA season. Matter of fact, I think this is the final regular season week in the NBA. And now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's a bonus bet back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored to three-pointers made. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So before we get into the goaltending issues, I thought there were a couple of controversial calls last night that did not go the Kings' way, and I wanted to briefly discuss them. The first one was a goal that made it 3-0, about 6 minutes into the game. Phil Kessel for the Golden Knights skated the puck into the Kings zone, left it for teammate Chandler Stevenson. And for some unknown reason, both Sean Durzi and Matt Roy went to Kessel, who was crashing the net, and left the shooter all alone. That's not a good thing to do. Anyway, Durzi and Roy and Kessel all ended up getting tied up. Durzi ended up high sticking Kessel, and then they all kind of crashed into the net, knocking the net off before Stevenson ended up shooting and scoring. There was no call on the ice, by the way. There was no immediate signal by the referee as to good goal where he points or wave it off, no goal. He just stood there. He then skated over to the other referee and the linesman joined in. They had a little conference, and then they decided, it's a good goal. I don't get that. Either you saw a good goal or you didn't. You make a call on the ice, and then you can go to review and try and figure things out. But I thought that was not the right way to handle that in the moment. So they go to video review, and you see Kessel and Durzi and Roy all go into the net. It gets knocked off, and it is clearly off by a foot or so, maybe more, before Stevenson even shoots the puck. I have no idea how that counts as a goal. They went to video review. They said good goal. Now, if Jonas Korpisalo had intentionally knocked the net off, or Durzi or Roy would have knocked the net off, or if they would have shoved Phil Kessel into the net and the net comes off, I get it. But I don't think that's the case. I think Phil Kessel was just as responsible for going into the net as the Kings players were forcing him into the net. They were all going to the net together. They all got tied up. To me, that was incidental contact. And again, how you can allow someone to shoot a puck into a net that's dislodged way before he even shoots it. It wasn't like he shot it and it goes over the line and there's a collision and the net comes off like all in one kind of a motion. It was clearly off. I don't know that I've ever seen a net be more off with a puck going into the net where it's not even close. I don't know how. Maybe I don't know the rule. I'm not claiming to know everything about hockey, but that makes no sense to me at all. I have no idea how that counted. The other controversial call came with about 12 minutes in the game, in the first period. Zach McEwen put a big hit on Ben Hutton, and he went kind of head first into the boards. Referees called McEwen for a 5-minute major for boarding. But 5-minute majors are reviewable, as we well know, and after reviewing it, they upheld the call. The Golden Knights got a power play. There was some 4-on-4 because there was a fight after the hit, but they eventually would score to make it 4-0. And this, of course, is particularly frustrating to us as Kings fans because we just saw Connor McDavid hit Mikey Anderson square in the numbers, causing him to go violently in the boards and cause an injury. And that was called a 2-minute minor on the ice. And upon video review, also a 2-minute minor. So this hit was not similar to the Connor McDavid hit because Connor McDavid clearly saw Mikey Anderson's numbers and drove straight through his back and into the boards. Now, the McEwen hit was more violent and it looked worse because of the way Hutton's head hit the boards. But the point is, how was the hit made? And to me, this was not clearly a guy hitting someone in the numbers and driving him into the boards. McEwen's coming from the center of the ice. Hutton's going along the boards. McEwen, it was more of a shoulder-on-shoulder hit than it was a shoulder into the back. It was kind of half shoulder, half back, kind of in that area. So clearly it was not as potentially dangerous as just hitting a guy straight into the numbers. Plus, Hutton stops up and kind of turns as it's going on as well. So to me, I get maybe calling it in the moment on the ice of five, but then you go to review and you look at it and you're like, well, he didn't drive him through the numbers. And it was sort of shoulder to shoulder. I think there was enough doubt there that you say that's not a major, that's a 2-minute minor, but that's not what they called. And of course, different set of referees, different set of judgments, but that's not the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to know as a referee if someone clearly hits somebody in the numbers, if they're vulnerable, as we read the rule when it happened with Connor McDavid. If the player is not in a position to be able to defend himself and he doesn't do anything himself to put him in a vulnerable position, that's one thing. But I don't know that that was the case on this one. Um, Again, I get that his head did go violently into the boards, but just because that's the case doesn't automatically make it a major. What were the circumstances surrounding the hit? How did the hit occur? What did the player himself do to put himself in a vulnerable position? I thought it was a violent hockey hit. I don't think it was definitely not intentionally dirty as far as I'm concerned, and it didn't cause an injury. Ben Hutton was shaken in the moment, but he didn't leave the ice. He stayed in the game and played the rest of the game. So as Kings fans, understandably frustrated with that because of what we just saw in Edmonton with Connor McDavid, but it didn't go the Kings' way, and then that was the way it kind of went for the Kings all night. And I will say this, I know that there is certainly some debate whether Zach McEwen should be in the lineup or not. I've been a part of that debate at times. I will at least give Zach McEwen credit for trying to do something to shake things up, to get the Kings going, to deliver a big hit that might, inspire them. So good on him for doing that. But in the end, ended up being a 5-minute major. I didn't agree with either of those calls. But again, part of the night for the LA Kings. Not a lot of things went the way of the Kings, and certainly they have their own share of the blame in that as well. I'm not even suggesting, by the way, if both those calls go the way of the Kings, that they're going to win that game. But at least it's not, 4-0. Maybe it's 2-0, and maybe the Kings still have a chance. They did score 2 goals in the second period. The Golden Knights wouldn't have gotten that 5-minute major power play, which they scored on. So, I mean, maybe, who knows? But didn't like either of those calls. And I don't complain a lot about officiating. I think if you've watched this show consistently, we talked about the McDavid hit. We're talking about this hit. Maybe there was one other call at some point, but I respect the officials that they have a difficult job to do. Hockey is a very fast-moving sport. But when you go to review and you get a chance at a second look at things and you still call the calls that I don't think are correct, that's frustrating. Okay, let's get into the evaluation of the goaltending. Jonas Korpisalo allowed 5 goals on 15 shots. He got pulled for the first time as an LA King. And the defense was bad. Jonas Korpisalo did not get a lot of help in this one, but some of the goals, a couple of the goals I think were on him as well. We'll talk about the first goal Vegas scored. Phil Kessel on a wraparound. Korpisalo saw it all the way. It wasn't like he was looking from his right to his left and then Kessel tucked it into the corner. He saw him all the way. He put his paddle down on the ice, parallel to the ice. Kessel came around, and I know you could talk about how Drew Doughty got caught behind the net and how Carl Grundstrom maybe didn't come over and cover in front of the net quickly enough, but I thought that was a goal that Jonas Korpisalo absolutely has to stop. The second goal, not on Korpisalo. Blake Lizotte couldn't get to a loose puck at the blue line. Then there was a pass made through the top of the crease. Matt Roy was trying to cover 2 players. He couldn't spin around and get his stick to deflect away the puck, and there was a player right at the back door for a tap-in goal, so that's not on Korpisalo. The third goal also I didn't think was on Korpisalo. We talked about it already. This was the play where the net was knocked off. The fourth goal, also I don't blame on Korpisalo. That was the power play goal after the Zach McEwen major. Another player on the back door all alone. It was a point shot. It ricocheted off the boards right to a Golden Knight who then passed it through the crease. That's a tough one to expect Korpisalo to make. The fifth goal, though, I will say I think Jonas Korpisalo, he's got to stop it. Now, again, he didn't get help. Anze Kopitar couldn't handle a Adrian Kempe pass in their own zone, turned it over, and the Golden Knights scored on the ensuing shot. But that was one of those ones where, yeah, he was put in a tough position because of the turnover, but sometimes you got to make a save to help your team out. And I thought that was one of those situations. So more on the defense than on Korpisalo, in my opinion. But I don't think that Korpisalo helped himself out as well. And I will have to say, if there was one good thing to come out of this game, it was probably the performance of Phoenix Copley in relief. He came in, stopped all 19 shots he faced, playing most of the second period and all of the third period. And yeah, Vegas did take their foot off the gas, especially in that third period. But if you're looking for something positive from an ugly game, I think it would have to be Phoenix Copley's performance off the bench. So let's look at the updated numbers after the game in Vegas, where both goaltenders did play. So both of their numbers are going to change from their last performances. We'll start with the starter, Joonas Korpisalo. He falls to 5-3-1 since joining the Kings. His goals against average jumped from 1.75 to 2.27, and his save percentage dropped from 937 to 920. Phoenix Copley, obviously no decision in this one, doesn't get a loss on this one. 6-1-1 with the LA Kings since Korpisalo was acquired. After his relief appearance against Vegas, his goals against average dropped from 2.11 to 1.96, and his save percentage went up from 915 to 924. So again, the head-to-head numbers right now, Korpisalo 5-3-1. I do think he's faced a little bit tougher competition than Phoenix. Copley is 6-1-1 since the trade deadline. The goals against average for Copley is now at 227 for Korpisalo is now at 227. Copley's now at 196. And the save percentage for Korpisalo is now at 920. And for Copley, it's now 924. So the numbers are now slightly in favor of Phoenix Copley. And for those of you that believe that Phoenix Copley should be the man to start the playoffs in net for the LA Kings, perhaps a little bit more evidence for your case. And by the way, not trying to be a hater here, but if you were watching the broadcast, they did show Jonathan Quick, who of course did not start in this game for the Vegas Golden Knights or did not play at all. Laurent Brossoit played for the Golden Knights. They showed Jonathan Quick on the bench, as you would expect. You know, they would want to show him on the broadcast, and they put up on the graphic his numbers. And I have to admit, I thought his numbers were a lot better with Vegas since he had gone there. I thought he had kind of turned his season around, but his numbers are still bad. His goals against average with Vegas is 3.43, and his save percentage is 895. Those are bad numbers. So I don't know if it makes you feel any better. Maybe it makes you feel a little worse, but I did notice that Jonathan Quick's numbers there in Vegas are still pretty much what they were when he was with the LA Kings. All right, we're going to try and turn the page and look ahead and maybe even give you a little good news heading into the weekend. But first, I want to thank you for watching Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. But once you're finished with this, I want to tell you to check out Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked on Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked on can deliver. NHL Game to Game on Locked on NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So looking ahead for the LA Kings, there are 3 games left in the regular season. This Saturday at home against Colorado, Monday at home against Vancouver, and the regular season finale in Anaheim against the Ducks on Thursday. The Stanley Cup playoffs begin on Monday, April the 17th. Now, we don't know yet if the Kings will play on that day or the next day. We also don't know who the Kings officially are going to be playing. So where they'll be traveling, will it be Edmonton? Will it be Las Vegas? As for the Kings' next few games, it'll be interesting to see what the lineup is. Now, as you might expect, I think about halfway through the game, Todd McClellan started to shuffle the lines up because why not try and do something to get things going? I think most notably, Quentin Byfield was taken off the top line, and I think he was on the third line, centering the third line. And so there's some things were shuffled around a little bit. So was that a temporary move, or is Todd McClellan now going to really kind of shuffle things up for the final few games of the season? We'll have to see what happens in the Colorado game. I will say that, if the players that we are keeping our fingers crossed come back from injury, they're eventually going to have to shuffle the lines up a bit anyway. So I don't think it's a big deal one way or another, to be honest with you. So let's check in on the Pacific Division standings as we now head into the weekend. The Vegas Golden Knights, with that win over the Kings, now have 106 points. They've got 3 games left in the regular season. They have a tough schedule remaining. Their 3 games are against Dallas, Seattle, and 2 of those games are on the road. The Edmonton Oilers are 3 points back of Vegas. They've got 3 games left as well, and their schedule is much easier. Now, they do play Colorado, but 2 games against the lowly Sharks. 2 of those games are on the road. So the schedule favors Edmonton, but obviously Vegas has the 3-point advantage. So that's going to be very close down the stretch. As for the Kings, 100 points, 3 games left. I don't see any realistic way that they will catch Edmonton to get home ice in the first round, or there's no chance of the division title anymore after that loss. So the Kings are not officially locked into that 3 spot, but I think realistically they are. And again, who the Kings play in the opening round is still very much up in the air. I think if Vegas can win 2 of their remaining 3 games, they'll hold on to win the division. But if they lose 2 of those remaining 3 games and Edmonton goes 2-1 down the stretch, say, I think the Oilers are going to win the division. And obviously, we're talking about regulation wins and losses. If there are overtime and shootout losses, then you get that extra point. That certainly factors in as well. But bottom line, I think Vegas has a slight advantage but really no margin for error. I think it's going to be, and I've said this for a long time, I think it's going to be Kings Oilers, but it still is not decided as we go down the stretch here and close out the regular season. I said I would leave you with some good news, and at least potentially some good news. John Hoven over at Mayor's Manor tweeted out today, and I will quote the tweet. Quote, "Sounds like defenseman Mikey Anderson will be back soon, may not play tomorrow night, yet should return in one of the final 3 games of the regular season." End quote. So a little bit of good news from the injury front. I will also have to throw out there that John Rosen, the former LA Kings insider, I saw he tweeted out that none of those 4 injured players participated in practice or did any skating on their own earlier today. But again, some potential good news there with Mikey Anderson. And you might be saying, well, that's great, but we need more offense. We need Fiala. We need Velarde. Well, I think it was pointed out on the broadcast, and I certainly agree with it. Mikey Anderson's presence on defense absolutely affects the offense. The way that the Kings are able to transition from defense to offense. So that Mikey Anderson back, plus it helps out the defense. The defense was bad against Vegas. So him back definitely helps out the Kings all the way around. So hopefully some good news being reported on Mikey Anderson, keeping our fingers crossed on that. That is going to do it for today's show. Thank you for enduring a recap of that difficult game. Turn the page. Us as fans and the Kings as well, got to move forward, got to think positively. Hopefully we get a couple players back and the Kings get a wake-up call, but understand the concern after that game. But hey, we'll see how they do against Colorado in a difficult opponent. If they can win that game and look good, maybe we all feel a little bit better about how things are going. But the Stanley Cup playoffs are still on the horizon. The Kings are in, and that's going to be, look, if the Kings go on and play well in the playoffs, advance out of the first round at least, we're going to forget all about this game against Vegas. So hopefully that will be the case. So that's going to do it for today's show. If you want to stay connected with the show over the weekend, we invite you to follow the show account on Twitter. It's at Locked On LA Kings. We're on Instagram as well at Locked On LA Kings. And as always, if you want to send an email to the show, we welcome that. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. I am Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings. Have yourself a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.